Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of Lemuria and Mu, the sunken continent scientists won't discuss. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. Before Atlantis, before Troy, before any civilization Western history records, there was said to be another world, a vast continent spanning the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, home to an ancient race whose knowledge eclipsed everything that came after. Scientists of the 19th century called it Lemuria. Esotericists called it Mu. Indigenous cultures across the Pacific and Indian Ocean call it by a dozen different names, all describing the same thing: a homeland lost beneath the waves in an ancient catastrophe, the memory of which has been carried across thousands of years and thousands of kilometers of ocean. The scientific establishment today dismisses Lemuria entirely, and for the most part, correctly. The geological mechanisms that would be required to sink a continent do not exist. Continental crust does not sink into the ocean floor on the timescale of human prehistory, but something else does. Sea levels rise, islands become archipelagos, coastal plains become shallow seas, and the genetic and linguistic connections between cultures on opposite shores of the Indian and Pacific Oceans remain genuinely difficult to explain without ancient contact across those waters. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. For as long as human beings have told stories, they have told stories about what was lost. Every great culture on Earth carries myths of a golden age, a time before the current order, when civilization stood taller, knew more, and reached further than anything that came after. For centuries, scholars categorized these stories as allegory, comforting fictions invented by cultures to explain the gap between their aspirations and their achievements. But a quiet revolution in archaeology, geology, and oceanography has changed that calculus. The evidence now accumulating from seafloors, ice cores, and ancient texts is demanding a fundamental revision of the human story, one in which the line between myth and memory is far thinner than we imagined. The conventional timeline of civilization holds that complex urban society first emerged in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Before that, scattered farming villages, nomadic hunter-gatherers, and nothing more. But this tidy narrative has been challenged repeatedly by anomalous discoveries that do not fit the accepted sequence. Megalithic structures dated to 10,000 BC or earlier. Astronomical alignments encoded in monuments by cultures supposedly too primitive to understand the sky. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture that would not be formally derived for thousands of years. These discoveries are not fringe fabrications. They are measured, published, and debated in peer-reviewed literature. They point toward a past far more complex than the textbooks describe. What happens when a civilization falls? Most of its knowledge disappears. The libraries burn, the engineers die, the farmers abandon the fields. Within a generation or two, the grandchildren of architects are living in the ruins of buildings they cannot build. We know this happened in the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC, when a networked civilization spanning the Mediterranean was destroyed in a matter of decades. We know it from the fall of Rome. History is not a steady march of progress. It is punctuated by catastrophic resets, after which humanity must begin again. The question is whether some of those resets happened far earlier than we know, and whether their traces are still waiting to be found beneath our feet. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Lemuria and Mu, the sunken continent scientists won't discuss, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The name Lemuria was coined in 1864 by British geologist Philip Sclater, who proposed a sunken landmass to explain why lemur fossils were found in Madagascar and India, but not in Africa or the Middle East. Sclater was attempting to explain biogeography before plate tectonics theory existed. The geological rationale was later superseded, but the name survived and was adopted by esoteric traditions with entirely different claims. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Kumari Kandam legend of Tamil culture describes an ancient Tamil homeland called Kumari Nadu or Kumari Kandam that was submerged beneath the Indian Ocean in a series of great floods separated by thousands of years. Tamil literary traditions reference 3 successive academies of scholarship, the last of which was lost when the sea swallowed the land, events described in texts predating modern oceanographic knowledge. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine genetic studies of populations around the Pacific and Indian Ocean basins have revealed extensive ancient contact that defies the simple model of isolated island development. Polynesian populations show genetic signatures indicating contact with South American populations well before European arrival, and some Melanesian groups carry DNA sequences that connect them to Amazonian indigenous peoples through routes that remain unexplained. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the ancient seafaring capabilities of Pacific Islander cultures are consistently underestimated by mainstream archaeology. Experimental voyages in reconstructed traditional vessels have confirmed that Polynesian navigators could reliably cover thousands of kilometers of open ocean using only stars, ocean swells, and bird behavior, suggesting a maritime tradition sophisticated enough to sustain contact across the entire Pacific basin. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of submerged archaeological sites have been identified at multiple points along the now flooded coastlines of the Indian Ocean shelf. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu in India, in the Lakshadweep archipelago, and near Sri Lanka. These sites contain stone structures whose dates, when measurable, fall before the 3500 BC threshold, of conventionally accepted civilization. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the Yonaguni monument off the coast of Japan, a complex of massive stone terraces, steps, and geometric formations discovered in 1987 at depths of 25 to 30 meters, has been debated intensely since its discovery. If the features are artificial, they were constructed when the site was above sea level, which places construction before approximately 10,000 BC, making it older than any recognized ancient culture in the region. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Lemuria and Mu. The sunken continent scientists won't discuss. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Lemuria and Mu are entirely fictional, the first created as a geological hypothesis since superseded, the second invented wholesale by early 20th century esotericist James Churchward, who claimed access to ancient stone tablets never produced for verification. The linguistic and cultural similarities between distant Pacific cultures are real but explainable by the extraordinary seafaring capability of ancestral Austronesian populations rather than a sunken homeland. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that while no continent sank beneath the Pacific or Indian Ocean, a series of large islands and continental shelf areas were rendered uninhabitable by the post-glacial sea level rise of 60 to 120 meters that occurred between 12,000 and 7,000 BC. Populations displaced from these submerged coastlines carried cultural memories of lost homelands that evolved into flood myths. This does not require a continent, only the flooding of inhabited land, which is geologically confirmed. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the ancient Austronesian diaspora, beginning around 5000 BC from the Taiwan region, represents one of the most extraordinary population dispersals in human history, eventually reaching Madagascar in the west and Easter Island in the east. The cultural and genetic threads connecting these populations were misinterpreted by 19th century observers as evidence of a sunken connecting landmass, when the actual explanation was an exceptionally capable seafaring civilization. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Lemuria and Mu, the sunken continent scientists won't discuss, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes ancient submerged structures found off the Tamil Nadu coast near Pumpuhar, investigated by Graham Hancock and marine archaeologist Glenn Milne, include a U-shaped knee structure at a depth of 23 meters, which would have been above water approximately 11,000 years ago, predating any recognized civilization in the region by 7,000 years. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented DNA analysis published in 2020 in Nature confirmed that Polynesian populations interbred with South American native populations approximately 1200 AD, providing genetic proof of pre-Columbian contact across the Pacific that required extraordinary navigational capability and calls into question the isolation model of Pacific island development. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Linguistic analysis has identified the Austronesian language family as one of the most geographically widespread in human history, with languages from Madagascar to Hawaii sharing a demonstrable common ancestor, evidence of a seafaring civilization whose reach spanned the Indian and Pacific Oceans long before European exploration. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Lemuria and Mu. The sunken continent scientists won't discuss. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The serious kernel inside the Lemuria myth is the reality of submerged prehistoric coastlines. Between 12,000 and 7,000 BC, as the Ice Age ended, coastal peoples worldwide watched their homelands disappear beneath rising seas. The greatest archaeological archives of early human civilization may therefore lie on the ocean floor. Marine archaeology is a young field, underfunded relative to its potential, and the submerged continental shelves of the Indian and Pacific Oceans remain almost entirely unsurveyed at archaeological resolution. What we will find there, when the technology and the funding finally align, may transform our understanding of human prehistory more profoundly than any discovery made on dry land. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Lemuria and Mu. The sunken continent scientists won't discuss, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Lemuria ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.